Rox-15 tone boost build. Now I have to say that this amp has given me more problems than any other amp I've ever built, and I've built 4 guitar amps, 3 hi-fi preamps, a phono stage, all valve, and several power amps. And this is the only amp that I've had to troubleshoot afterwards. All the rest of the builds, again, they've all been build by number kits, so nothing I've scratch built myself, but this is the only amp that's given me any issues after the build has been finished. And there is still one further issue. I'm getting some scratchiness on the master volume pot, which is indicative of DC on the negative side of the board, and indeed one of the capacitors attached to the master volume is showing signs of DC leakage, so that's going to have to be replaced. But as there are 2 there, one for each side of the master volume pot, I will replace both of those with a pair, because I don't have a like for like replacement. I have a different brand, so I'll be replacing them both together. None of the issues have been particularly of a design aspect. The only thing that I came across was the boost switch being shown on the layout diagram as being wired backwards. See previous videos for what I'm talking about there. The failing silver mica capacitor, well, that could happen at any stage, and it was diagnosed quite quickly, and Modulus were great and sent out replacements, sent out 2 replacements, a higher value one if I wanted to use it, which I did in the end. I haven't bothered contacting them about the DC on the leakage capacitor, because again, it can happen, and it's not really an issue. It could even be that I overheated the capacitor when I was soldering it in, because I've done a lot of soldering and reworking on this board because of the perceived faults I have, which I thought might have been a joint, but they turned out to be the silver mica capacitor. So things I don't like about the build: the faceplate is off centre. I think, as you can see, there's a big gap on this side, then on this side from the printing on the front, or the engraving on the front, which means to get it to look symmetrical in the amplifier casing, you have to have it off centre, otherwise it just looked weird when I put it in centrally, the amplifier chassis in centrally in the casing initially. So I had to mount it off centre to accommodate this unevenness in the fascia board. The other thing I didn't like is how close the etching is along the bottom, or the engraving along the bottom, with the designations for the controls, which means you don't have very much room to play with on the cutout for the fascia. You have to be, well, as you can see, you've only got a couple of millimeters down here, and that means you have to be really accurate. And I wish they'd have brought these up slightly, all these up slightly, so they were inside the box that is etched around the controls. That would have made it a bit more easy to cut a smaller, or make a smaller fascia cutout, which means you could work with a bit less precision. But apart from that, the amplifier has a very good selection of tones available. Now, one of the things that I've been asked for a few times in the comments is a playing demo, and as I've explained, my guitar playing, or my musicianship, is, well, bad, to say the least. Excuse me. And I've feigned away from doing that, but I have, after I finish this, I am going to do that. I'll still have the dodgy capacitors in there, because that doesn't affect the tone or the playing at all. It's only when you, because the leakage through there's a minimal amount of DC voltage anyway. But I'll record a session now. I will be using this camera and this mic, so it will automatically self-limit so that the microphone doesn't distort. So what it means is if I turn everything up, the perceived volume won't increase that much, because the limiter is on the microphone. But hopefully it will give you an idea of the tonal availability with the amplifier, if not the loudness per se, because as I say, the microphone in the camera auto limits the maximum amount of volume coming in, so when I turn up the volume it won't appear to go up very much, because the camera will be reducing the volume down, but it will give you some idea, as I say, of the tonal availability. In the previous video I showed that I was cutting all the leads so I could put longer leads in. Now you're always advised to make the leads as short as possible to reduce signal loss, hum, etc. But I think that's very important on the tube side, but less so on the side with the controls. It still does affect it, and I would say that I have a very, very, very marginal increase in noise levels, but I have put in a lot more wire on this side, so I can tilt up the turret board should I need to get in for any essential repairs at a later date. Everything else is fine. Now the other thing I've been asked for is some of the test voltages I came up with. Well, when I was doing the fault finding with this problem I had, Modulus did send me a chart which you fill in and then send back to them, which gives the voltages that you're getting on the amplifier. So what I'll do is I will show that alongside the circuit board layout, so you can see where they want to take the target readings from. Now they told me mine were all okay. There is no indication on their sheet of what they expect the voltages to be, apart from the heater wires, of course, which is a combined 6.3 volts or around that, or 3 point something per side. So after I'll take this away from the table and I'll put out the circuit diagram and the sheet that they sent me to fill in, which I then subsequently sent back to them, and they said the voltages were all fine. So you can then pause the picture and either take a screenshot or make your own chart available if you are going to go ahead and build this, and treat those as indicative voltages. You might not get exactly the same voltages because of component variation, valve variation, and the voltage present at the time of testing. Now at the time of testing mine, the wall voltage was 243 volts. So anyway, without further ado, I'll take this away and I'll put up the voltage chart and the circuit diagram or the circuit layout. Okay, the voltage output chart that Modulus sent taking V5, V4, the two output valves, V3, V2, V1, the preamp and phase inverter stage. So basically, as you can see, it just details down the pins and how much voltage you should see at each of those. With the exception of the heaters, they're saying it should have approximately 315 volts AC on each pin. I was a bit over that, as you can see, but it's all within tolerance. You can measure directly at the pins themselves on the valves, or for instance, if you're measuring DL84s, you can measure at the tag strip which goes to the pin. For instance, pin 6 here, you can measure it here, pin 1 there. Don't have to go to the down, you can measure it there, because there's nothing in between the pin and the turret board, so the voltages there or there and there will be the same. Obviously here where there's a 10k resistor, you have to measure at the pin, because there will be a voltage drop if you measure it at the, or in this case, the switch or the input. So here you can see the voltages that I got. Let me actually pull that in further and zoom in a bit, so that makes it a bit clearer, so you can just take a quick snapshot of that. So pause it now, take a quick snapshot of that on your screen, and you can either create your own chart or just use that as a guideline. Right, now the capacitors, which we'll keep there, there are B1, B2, B3, B4, B5, and these are simply B1 is at this point here. Let me move that up a bit. So B1 352.5 is at this point, B2 is at this point, B3 is at this point, and B4 and B5 are either side of the dual cap, so B4 and B5. So hopefully that will be of some help to you if you're building the amplifier yourself, so you know what sort of target voltage is. Of course, you can always just ask Modulus to have a quick look at your voltages, ask them to send you a chart, which they'll do by email. It's just an Excel spreadsheet with it on, fill it in, send it back to them, and they'll obviously be able to say if everything's okay. So again, voltage chart here, if you want to now pause it and take a screenshot of that and use that for your build. I hope that helps. So now, the other bit that people have been asking for, the dreaded playing demo with my bad guitarmanship or musicianship. Anyway, what I've done is I've just bashed out a few chords, or a few chord sequence on my PRS hollow body, and what I've done is I've recorded that on my looper, and I'll just play a sequence through the looper and then change the controls as we go, so that you can hear hopefully some of the sounds available on the amplifier. So without further ado, Well, hopefully that will give you some idea of the variation in tones available on the amplifier. Generally I'm really quite pleased with the tones. Now, I deliberately used the PRS because it has a very bright set of pickups, and what I will say is the normal input is very soft and a bit mushy, and when I play my vintage Epiphone Wildcat, which already has a dark P90 sound, it's incredibly bassy and not very usable at all without dialing up a lot of brilliance and a lot of treble. But at least you can do that.